Before I start, I need to explain something. I'm into weapons. Not in a lunatic way, more like a preparedness obsession. Firearms, survival tactics, optics, flashlights, binoculars, tactical gear, that kind of thing. I own quite a bit of it. The pride of my collection is a bolt-action hunting rifle, a Remington 700, paired with two high-quality scopes, one for long-range observation, one more compact. I don't think the world is ending tomorrow. I just like knowing I'm ready if something goes wrong. That's the background. The story itself happened when I temporarily rented an apartment in a large northeastern district of a major city. I was there for work, only for a couple of months, so I didn't bother getting comfortable. The place was cheap, no TV, no internet. I didn't plan to install any since I'd be leaving soon anyway. As it turned out, I also had far less work than expected, so my evenings were empty. At first, I read books. Then, once it got dark, I started doing something else. Around the third night, I set up my rifle near the window. Not loaded, never loaded. I was just adjusting the scope, checking distances to streetlights, rooftops, parked cars. At some point, without really meaning to, I drifted across a few windows in the building opposite mine and got hooked. I dragged a desk over to the window, mounted the rifle on it, pulled the curtains almost shut, leaving only a narrow gap, and started observing the residents of the building across the street. From then on, that's how I spent almost every evening. Yes, you can judge me. And you'd be right. There's something deeply wrong about watching people through the crosshairs of a rifle, even an unloaded one. But once I started, I couldn't stop. The building across from me was full of characters. The guy on the 6th floor who watched porn every night got boring fast. But the skinny teenage karate kid on the 9th floor, who trained mercilessly in his kitchen every evening, became a favorite. So did the young couple on the 7th floor. That couple was enthusiastic. In the few days I watched them, they explored just about every possible way to have sex, and clearly weren't planning to slow down. They also seemed unaware that their bedroom light could be turned off. I watched them a lot, for educational purposes. There were others, too. Alcoholics who only became interesting during drunk fights, divorced parents with kids, ordinary families. Plenty to look at, but this story isn't about them. One night, during another session, I accidentally looked into a window on the 8th floor, one I hadn't paid much attention to before. Inside was a nearly empty room, lit by a single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling. The door was closed. In the corner, on a bed, sat a person. He was sitting perfectly still, cross-legged, facing the wall. That's what caught my attention, the complete lack of movement. I focused the scope. The man was tall, extremely thin, pale, completely bald. His head looked too large for his body. He wasn't wearing a shirt or pants. His back was to the window. I watched him for 5 minutes. He didn't move. I shifted the scope to the wall he was staring at. It was empty. No pictures, no decorations, just old, peeling wallpaper. I scanned the room. A couple of chairs, a coffee table stacked with newspapers, an old armchair, a small rug near the bed. On the closed door, I noticed several strange vertical marks. That was it. I assumed he was meditating, decided nothing interesting would come of it, switched back to my karate kid, who was warming up for another brutal session. A couple of hours later, when the kid and the couple were done for the night, I checked the yogi again. Same position, same stillness. After 30 seconds, I put the rifle away and went to sleep. I would have forgotten all about it if I hadn't accidentally checked that window again a few days later. Nothing had changed. And for some reason, that irritated me. I'll admit it. I had started to believe that every resident of that building owed me entertainment, and this guy just sat there, staring at a wall. Maybe he wasn't even awake. Maybe he slept sitting up. Or maybe he wasn't alive at all. A mannequin. Or a corpse. Or someone who'd gone too far during meditation and just left. I watched him for a full hour. No movement. A mannequin then. But why would there be a mannequin in a bedroom? Was the apartment empty? Then who turned on the light? I checked nearby windows. To the right was clearly another apartment. A family with 2 small kids lived there. To the left, the windows were dark. That night, even my favorite windows couldn't hold my attention. The next day, I came home early and immediately went to the scope. Still sitting there. Same pose. Although, maybe he'd turned slightly. Something was happening. I watched all evening, didn't even leave for the bathroom. He sat, stared at the wall, barely seemed to breathe, or maybe that was just my imagination. When my eyes started to ache, I gave up and went to bed. In the morning, before work, I checked again. No change. This went on for a week, a few minutes every morning, several hours every night. His position would occasionally change slightly, but I never saw when or how. One day I came home and noticed the bedsheets had been changed. That's when I decided to monitor him around the clock. I spent the evening setting everything up. The rifle sat on a bipod, aimed at the window. A video camera was mounted on a tripod, aligned with the scope's eyepiece. It recorded directly to my laptop's hard drive. In the morning, I checked everything, hit record, and left for work. The first day was a disappointment. The camera captured 8 hours of footage. The man sat motionless the entire time. I barely found the patience to try again the next day. The second time, I got lucky. At 2:17 p.m., the door to his room opened. A woman entered, carrying a tray. At first, I thought she was feeding him, but the tray was almost empty. Just a small vial and a few boxes. She approached him slowly and placed the tray on the bed in front of him. She stood there for a moment, watching him. I thought they were talking, but her lips never moved. She rubbed his left arm, then leaned toward him tensely for a few seconds. I couldn't see exactly what she was doing. His thin back blocked the view, but it looked like she gave him an injection. Then she moved sideways toward the window, opened it slightly, and lit a cigarette. She smoked, closed the window, took the tray, and backed out of the room, never once turning her back to him. That was it. When I checked through the scope afterward, the room looked exactly the same as in the last frame of the video. Without the recording, I would never have known anyone had been there. I rewatched the footage several times. Something about it felt wrong. Logically, it was simple. A severely disabled man, a caretaker, injections, routine care. But the woman's behavior bothered me. I watched the footage again. And again. I checked my subject through the scope, still sitting there. I went to bed. Over the next week, I learned a few things. The woman entered the room every other day, between 2 and 3 p.m. She gave an injection, smoked, and left. As far as I could tell, nothing else ever happened in that room. Still, the obsession grew. I never saw the sheets being changed again, and I finally understood what was unsettling about the woman. In every visit I recorded, she never once turned her back to him. I watched him for several more weeks. I barely worked. My entire routine revolved around that window. The bedsheets were changed again at some point, and again, I never saw how. The only explanation was that it happened at night, while I slept. I also noticed that the woman left the apartment a couple of times each week. She'd be gone for 30 to 40 minutes. I saw her exit the building and return carrying shopping bags. A grocery store first, then a pharmacy. I tried to see what she bought at the pharmacy, but she always kept the receipt. Asking the clerk felt wrong, dangerous even. Every 2 days she entered the room. Injection, cigarette, exit. Never turning her back. I studied the room obsessively, the marks on the door, the peeled wallpaper. Eventually, the realization crept in. The vertical marks on the door weren't random damage. They were scratches, and the wallpaper had been torn off the same way. By fingernails. His fingernails. I had no proof, no concrete reason to believe it, but I couldn't find any other explanation. He started to scare me. I would sit for hours, staring at the back of his bald head through the scope, watching him sit in the corner of that room. And what made it worse was knowing that, in the apartment next door, small children were running and jumping on a couch, while just a few meters away, behind a shared wall, that thing sat on a bed, facing the wall. I knew I had to do something. But what? Call the police? What would I say? "Officer, there's a guy across the street who doesn't move." They'd knock. No one would answer. End of story. I exhausted myself. I searched online endlessly. Forums, medical cases, horror stories. Most of it was garbage. One story maybe felt vaguely related, but nothing concrete. I tried asking around the building. No one seemed to know anything about that apartment. Eventually, I made the stupidest decision of my life. I prepared carefully. 2 knives, my best ones, a non-lethal revolver, a mask, just in case, lockpicks, a flashlight, firecrackers for distraction, a smoke canister. I stuffed everything into my pockets, trying not to look suspicious, trying not to make noise with every step. Then I went outside, sat on a bench near the entrance, and waited. If law enforcement had decided to question me at that moment, my life would have fallen apart. Sometimes I wish they had. The worst part was this. Sitting there on the bench, I had absolutely no idea what I planned to do. After about 40 minutes, I saw the woman leave the building and head toward the store, her usual route. I had roughly half an hour. I stood up and entered the building she'd just left. I went up to the 8th floor. The hallway door wasn't locked. I opened it quietly. Inside was a dim corridor. One end of it was heavily cluttered, metal bed frames stacked against the wall, a bicycle without wheels, skis, sleds, dusty boxes, broken furniture, and a wheelchair. That caught my attention. I realized the apartment I was looking for was at the cluttered end of the hallway. Holding my breath, I moved toward it. There it was. Apartment 41. A plain door covered in brown vinyl. Ordinary handle. Lock. Peephole. Nothing unusual. I stopped a couple of meters away, trying to collect my thoughts. What am I doing here? What do I think I'm going to do? My hands were shaking violently. I kept looking back and forth between the door and the wheelchair. Then I noticed something else. Under my own heavy breathing, I heard another sound. I froze and listened. Shook, shook. The sound was coming from inside apartment 41, and it was getting closer. Before I fully understood what it was, it stopped. Silence. It hit me all at once. Those were shuffling footsteps. He was standing right behind the door, watching me through the peephole. The doorknob suddenly started spinning rapidly. Something slammed into the door from the inside. Hard. The door creaked under the pressure. I panicked. I turned and ran. I don't remember how I got down 8 flights of stairs. I only know it was fast. I didn't run straight home. I circled the block, trying to shake myself, trying not to look like a lunatic. 10 minutes later, I was back in my apartment. Still wearing my shoes, I rushed to the window, grabbed the rifle, aimed at his window. And that's when I was truly terrified. He was standing at the window, scraping the glass with his hands, and I swear he was staring directly at me. I saw him for only a second, but I will never forget it. A stretched, skeletal body, bones visible beneath pale skin, arms far too long, fingers bent and clawed, dragging across the glass, an enormous bald head, and on it, a tiny, grotesque face without a nose, just two large, dark eyes and a mouth with no lips. His hands moved, his mouth opened and closed, leaving wet smears on the glass, and his eyes never left me. My mind froze, but my body acted. Like in a dream, I stumbled back from the window and ran to the closet where my ammunition was stored. Seconds later, I was back, the rifle loaded. I didn't care what would happen afterward. I chambered around and raised the scope. In the crosshairs, only tightly drawn curtains, swaying gently. I moved out that same day, paid the landlord. He didn't ask questions. I was grateful. I buried myself in work. Months passed. Things faded. But I still think about him. I finally understood why he was seated facing the wall. They had placed him that way, on purpose, so he wouldn't see other people. What is he? I don't know. Is he dangerous? Absolutely. Sometimes I see him in my dreams. He scratches at my door. I look through the peephole, and my rifle misfires. Every time. I don't like that he saw me. Am I afraid? I own weapons. I know how to use them. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared.